Okay, in terms of stuff, deadlines remain the same. So exam 3, exam 4, quiz and assignments part 4, deadline is Friday, April 26th at 11:59 p.m. Exam 5, the exciting final, deadlines normal time of the finals week. And to see if you need the final, the thing to do is, once you know all the stuff you wish to do, get the grade estimator, put in your overall quiz grade, overall paper grade, that's 3 exams, hypothetical 100 for the final. Look at that overall grade. If it's a letter grade or better, then your real overall grade, taking the final, could make a difference. And of course, you can also put in various numbers to see what you need to do. So maybe it's 82 they would do it, or whatever it might be. And it's also a matter of math. So if your 100% of the final would take you from like an 80 to an 82, then you'd have a better numerical grade, but there's no pluses and minuses, so it wouldn't change it. But keep in mind that grades of X9.1, I round them up. I did that manually, so it won't see a change on Blackboard. So if you got from, say, 77 to 79.2, yeah, that could be worth doing. And again, it's a judgment call about how much resources and time you want to spend on the final. And the final can't hurt your grade, but if there's only like a slim chance, like getting 100, perfect 100 to improve your grade, may not be worth it. But it might be. Again, but it can never lower your grade. For those who haven't done the paper yet, there's still the desperation deadline, also the 26th. Extra credity stuff, people always ask about that. There's, of course, the +5 in the paper, that deadline that was back a couple weeks ago. Also, there's a STARS quiz. Not really a quiz, but the way it works is you go to the survey, you'll see it basically checkbox things to check which classes you're in that I teach. And then what I do is I get the results, look upon it, take the percentage of participation, add plus 10 percentile points to that, and then that goes in for the survey quiz. This can never hurt your grade, so even if people just say, screw it, no surveys for me, even if a 0 goes in there, it just gets dropped. Other extra credity stuff, as I mentioned at the start, the assessment stuff can only help your grade, and here's what remains. There's the post-test argument basic assessment instrument. Doing that can only help your overall grade, can't hurt it. There's also the other surveys that I linked to. One is a Gen Ed survey, the one we do every year. One is a new 4-year graduation assessment survey. And you may be thinking, more BS surveys, I have so much BS. And these are actually, I know probably everyone says their surveys are important. These are actually kind of worth doing. The GIAC Gen Ed survey, first one, gives you feedback on your Gen Ed experiences in general, and it does go to the committee. I'm the co-chair of the committee, and we do actually look at those results and do stuff with them. So it doesn't just go into a binder and accumulate dust for eternity. There's also the second one, which is the 4-year graduation rate survey, and that is to get feedback from you as to any bottlenecks or impediments you see in the Gen Ed in terms of completing your graduation, completing your degree in 4 years.
I have a question about grade. Right? So it says out of 205 points. So how come the difference between the points you have and the overall grade are different?
I keep trying to get rid of that thing. Yeah, Blackboard keeps putting in the point things, and that means nothing. I keep deleting the column. It's like, screw you, I'll put that back in there. And this column means, the point thing doesn't tell you anything except points out of some points, whatever Blackboard's doing. The only columns that matter are the overall grade, your overall grade of the class, and then the particular grades. So the point thing doesn't tell you anything except to mislead you by saying, here's some points, because it doesn't give any scale worth. Yeah, so good question. Yeah. And I keep trying to delete it, but Blackboard, I don't know why, it keeps insisting on, you gotta have that column. And maybe I should just hide it and stop deleting. Maybe I'll just give up, give into the demons of Blackboard and say, okay.
Does exam 5 have a different weight than the other ones, or is it just a replacement of one test?
Replace the other ones, yeah. So the final doesn't count anymore. I mean, some classes know the final can count more, but it's just simply an exam. So that way, if it was worth more than the exams, it probably worth doing because it could outweigh them, but it simply counts the same. But if it's better than the others, it swaps out whatever one it's better than. And if you don't do it, it's already as a 0, so your grade would not lower. So doing the final, worst case scenario, your grade stays the same. You waste 2 hours of your life or less. Best case scenario is that it can improve your grade. But again, before doing it, it's a matter of math. So you'd want to check to see if it could do anything. Now, if it's close, the assessment stuff might be able to like bump it up a little bit. But if you're like 10 points away, then probably not. And if you have questions like, should I, this is what my grade would be if I take the final, would it be worth me trying it? I'll give you an honest answer. Like, yeah, that may, it may be worth it. And again, but not doing it can't hurt you. It'll either, except for like emotional damage and wasted time, but it can't lower your grade. And so the assessment stuff also cannot hurt your grade. So if you just say, I'm not doing the STAR quiz, I'm not doing the ABI, I'm not doing the surveys, screw that, you'd end up with basically getting nothing. You wouldn't suddenly see your grade drop. So nothing that you can do, aside from like hacking Blackboard and lowering your grade, can lower your grade. All this stuff this stuff just helps, and the other stuff either leaves it the same or helps. So it's either positive or nothing, no loss. There's no final penalty, there's no penalty for not doing the stuff. Only rewards or nothing.
Is there like an estimate for how much that extra credit is?
It could be, I guess you have an honest answer, it could be up to 2 points on your overall grade, which is quite a bit. So if you're within, say if the exam can get you within like 1.8 points, it could be worth the spinning the wheel. But no, the only guarantee is it can't hurt you. Okay, anything else?
That's during final, that's not.
Right, exam 5, the deadline's at the end of the normal final during finals. I believe that's like Thursday, I'll have to look up the exact time, it's like,
It's like 12.
yeah, 12, I think like, yeah, 12. And so it's available until then. And it's on Blackboard, you can get it, you can do it ahead of time. Just be sure to complete it before that deadline, if you need to.
I have one more question. For absences, I know I've been here every day, but like there's sometimes where like I may have signed the wrong date and like it's gotten messed up. Are absences like a penalty in this class?
No,
Okay, that's fine.
I probably should.
I've messed it up a couple times and signed it on the wrong date.
Yeah, if you look at the Blackboard, there's no attendance column.
Okay, thank
So
you.
nothing, if it's not in the grade columns, it doesn't affect the grade. That is the contract. Well, it can only improve the grade. There's no, says the assessment's on the columns, but that can only benefit you. So nothing that could hurt your grade. If it's going to hurt your grade, it has to be in the grade column. That is the law. Not really, but it is, I guess, kind of. Anything else? Yeah, like I said, the surveys, especially the 4-year graduation one's important because if you've ever said, I need to knock out this gen ed course, but it's just never offered, then this is a time to inform us, because we're doing an analysis of the 4-year graduation rate and how the general education, that's like the communication stuff, the science stuff, the African-American, history, etc. requirement, the FA requirement. So all that gen ed stuff, we want feedback, like are you getting thwarted by the gen ed? Because it's not supposed to be there to thwart you. And so if you've had like bad or good experiences, let us know, because our plan is to address those particular bottlenecks, because we have to improve our 4-year graduation rate, because we hit our 6-year graduation rate goal, and then we were going to get some money from the state, but they said, we meant not 6, we meant 4, so no money for you seconds. So now we're trying to get the 4-year up, in which case I'll probably go to like 3.4-year graduation rate. The moral of the story is they're terrible. Okay, so last time we're looking at the ethics of belief. Before going on to the more of Clifford, not the big red dogs, sadly, Ethan needs more stuff. Okay, so we're turning to a brief look at the British philosopher W.K. Clifford, sadly not the big red dog, would make an awesome philosopher. 1845 to 1879. Ooh, short lifespan. Poor fellow. His approach to the ethics of epistemology is pretty strict, as we'll see. So what is his approach? Well, his example is this. Imagine, if you will, the following scenario. And this is taking place in the 1800s, which is why he's used the ship, but I guess you could use a ship as well today. Suppose you have someone who has, they own a ship. And of course, the 1800s, so could be steam, but probably sail. And they make their money basically by selling tickets to immigrants. I suppose it's going from the UK to the, from Europe to the US, and selling tickets to the ship. Now, the owner knows the ship is old, not well built, and in poor repair. Now, today, of course, we could switch this to, if you wanted to modernize the example, we could use the example of airliners. For example, the terrible crashes that took place with Boeing airliners. So you could use that as an example. If you wanted to modernize it, we could say, instead of the ship, we could say a company's got an airliner, and they know that there's a problem with the software because two of them just crashed. But in the case of the ship example, the owner knows the ship is old, not well built, not well maintained, but just decides to not have it inspected. Or we again, using the modern example, we can imagine the company says, okay, the plane has got some problems, but let's just, as they try to do, let's just keep it flying. And so the owner dismisses all doubts in their mind, and they trust in, basically God. As they say, God will get him through it. And so what the ship owner manages to do is they get a sincere conviction of its safety. They have convinced themselves that everything's going to be all right. Now, again, using a modernized example, you could find a bunch of examples of companies where they know their product is dangerous. Like cars, there was a problem with cars that the ignition would just turn off. So if you have like a keychain with some extra weight on it, which if you're American, you've got all kinds of crap in your keychain. That's just how it is. I tried to just do one, and it just got, and it would just turn the car off. And as you might imagine, if your car just like turns off when you're going 75 on the highway, that is bad. And so like a company might just say to itself, oh, this is fine, that it's just, the driver's fault, it's not gonna happen, everything's gonna work out. And so a company or an owner can convince himself it's all gonna be fine, nothing to worry about. Now in Clifford's example, of course, the ship being badly built, etc., it sinks and kills everybody. So everybody dies. Or like with the airliner, the software that's supposed to keep it, help it stay, in the air, plummets it kills everybody. So the ship owner has, taken out insurance on the ship and collects all his insurance money without any guilt. It was just, everything was well, but things sometimes go wrong. The world is a dangerous place. So the moral question is, even though the ship owner sincerely believed it, they put themselves in a state of, being totally, confident. Again, you can imagine a contemporary example. You can imagine like the board meeting and saying, oh, we've had these deaths, and people tell themselves, oh, that's because, people are putting too much stuff in their keys, or they're not taking care of their cars properly, it's not really their fault, nothing to worry about, it's all fine. And they convince themselves, they're not lying they're lying to themselves, but they believe their own lies. So the question morally is that okay? Now Clifford says, no, why not? Well, he bases it on the right to believe that the owner, given the evidence that they had, the ship is in poor condition, the ship has not been properly maintained, it's badly built, that they had no right to believe that everything's going to be okay. And again, going contemporary examples, you could say, well, if you have a board, they get all these reports of, the plane 7 problems, or like the cars are just, you know, ignition turns off. Or we could take the example of, you know, climate change, where people are just, there's the overwhelming scientific consensus that climate change is real, and then people sincerely believe it's not. And that'd be a good contemporary example. I mean, I know people who, they really believe it. They sincerely, they're not, some people just be like, oh yeah, it's not real, you know, I know they're just lying, they don't believe that at all. But there are people who truly and sincerely believe it, and they have, in a sense, made themselves believe. So the moral question is, are we morally obligated to go with the evidence, or is it okay, you know, to simply sort of deceive ourselves in cases where it could hurt other people or ourselves?
I kind of like well, it kind of makes me think of like Kierkegaard, where he says like to make a decision or either or is a moral decision in itself, because you decided the consequences of something. Whether if you know something's gonna happen, you make a decision to do anything and fix it, but to do nothing is where you really make the bad moral decision. That not doing anything is worse than just saying like, oh, that exists, I know what comes with it. So them just saying like, yeah, well, maybe too many people putting too much weight on their keys and not doing anything about the fact that someone is reporting that there are deaths and that you can stop them in any way. And so that, I was able to connect that with that.
Yeah, as you said, people do have to make that choice. If information comes in, they have to choose to believe one thing or another. You know, like with the case of the keys, either you say, okay, it's fine, or it's not. Or in the case of climate change, either we say we do something about it, or we don't.
Do you think that's like the biggest problem we have ethically, is that we have proper knowledge and information that there is a problem, and that rather than us attack the problem because it exists, sometimes we could be passive and just say, well, it's not enough for us to act on, or the situation isn't anything.
Yeah, that's a good point, because if we look at some of the, we'll take some of the big problems we've got. I mean, a big one is climate change. Another one is, because of all the people dying of, you know, getting measles, is also vaccination. And then also we have politics. You know, we have the thing about the Russians interfering with our, you know, our elections. Yeah, and so these are, you know, good examples of, you know, that exact problem, the ethics of epistemology. So we have climate change where the overwhelming evidence is real. Could the scientists be wrong? Yes, because that is, we saw that's going back to inductive reasoning. No matter how well you do your inductive, you know, causal analysis, you could always be wrong, not impossible. So what people do is they make that, if they're smart, but evil, they make that claim. You know, they could be wrong. And so you have people, then with vaccination, you have the overwhelming scientific consensus that there are side effects. I got a vaccine a while back, and it didn't kill me, obviously, but I was like, it was pretty rough shape. But it was worth it, because the thing that it's a vaccine for shingles, and it's way worse than the shingles is way worse than the worst side effect of the vaccine. Because a friend of mine got it, he's like, get the vaccine. I ain't dying.
You were an adult at that time?
I'm not yet an adult. I'm still working towards it. I'm working towards that. Yeah, because it's my own choice. But, you know, there are people, you know, parents deciding for the kids on the basis of, there is a study, but it was, you know, it was discredited, and the doctor ended up actually losing their license to practice medicine. And in a way, we're all part, if you had your vaccinations, you're part of a massive study, in the sense that we've all targeted our vaccinations, but we're, you know, okay.
So I'm like kind of ignorant when it comes to like vaccinations, right? So I'm always like, I don't know, I'm like a hippie kind of person, and I have like real progressive parents. So my parents aren't into like vaccines and stuff like that, right? But I have all my vaccinations because it's like the law now, right?
Good.
So, and you have to like get them to go to school. But it was always kind of like, well, if everyone around is vaccinated, right, and no one has said disease, how am I supposed to then get the disease, or wouldn't it just be my fault, right? there's that part, and then it's like, well, if I get it and everyone else is vaccinated, why would they get it too? So I feel like at the end of the day, shouldn't it just be like that person's individual choice to get it? Like, where's the wrongness in my theory, like,
Oh, yeah,
vaccinations?
so-
Like, I don't understand.
Yeah, tying this in here, one of the arguments that people advance as to, you know, people make the argument they have a sincere belief that against vaccination. And so one, you know, question is, do they have a right to believe that, to put other people at risk based on the sincerity of their belief? Because if they're wrong, you're asking me essentially, what if I'm wrong about this, or am I wrong? And if I am wrong, what are the consequences, and am I wrong? So am I obligated to know the truth about vaccines, or can I just go with what I believe? Now, in terms of that, you know, the standard claim is like one you make, like, if I'm not vaccinated, but everyone around me is vaccinated, why am I not fine? So why should I get vaccinated? Now, the question then is that actually true? Is there no reason for you to not get vaccinated? Well, here's the argument. One is, can use an analogy. Imagine you're a reporter or a soldier in a combat zone, and you say, as long as everyone around me is wearing their bulletproof vest and helmet, why should I wear mine? And then you're out walking around, and you get shot. And it's like, why didn't Ted's vest protect me? It's like, because you're not. Ted's wearing his vest. He's okay. So, if you were never exposed to the virus, you'd be fine. But when you're out in the world, suppose do you ever travel? Do you ever go to like Starbucks? Do you ever go to restaurants? Yeah, because there's no, you know, on campus, everyone's had their vaccines, hopefully. But if you go anywhere,
I think so,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, so you could go to Starbucks. There could be somebody there who's got measles or whatever, and boom.
But if they are vaccinated, how did they get measles?
They weren't. They use
So it's us together who didn't get
yeah,
vaccinated.
they use the same logic as you. They say, why should I get mine? Everyone else has got theirs. And so they get measles, they give you measles, now you've got measles.
Now we all have measles.
Yeah, now everybody's got measles. Also, there are people who can't get the shots. There are infants, you know, you have to be a certain age to get the vaccines, and people who are really, really old, they can't get, at a certain point, some of them can't get vaccines. So if you don't get yours, even though you could get it and transfer it to them. So, I mean, if everyone gets theirs, then yeah, if that were true, everyone but you got theirs, you'd be fine, because no one could give you the.
I see, okay, but that's not how it works, okay.
Right, but if there are other people who don't, then if you encounter them, you get measles or whatever, and then you can pass it on to other people. Yeah, so the question is, are people obligated to know that, or could someone say, I sincerely doubt vaccines? Because there are parents who say, I believe they cause autism,
Yeah,
I
stuff
don't,
like that.
yeah, I don't believe they work.
There's that garden stool shot that prevents like HPV, like cancer or whatever, and I've heard like so many like bad side effects, and like they've left people like paralyzed, and they've made them infertile, and all kind of crazy stuff like that, so my mom's like super against it and things like
Right, because with all these cases, you know, using the example of climate change, vaccination, and like Russian interference, you can always refer to some they who say that vaccination causes autism, that it causes cancer, infertility, etc. But then the question is, do you have a moral right to believe those claims? And a fair question to ask is, are you obligated to go and see if they're actually true? Because how do you know that they are right? You know, so if a person is not getting their kids vaccinated against HPV, which is, you know, can cause all kinds of problems, because they heard something on, you know, their cousin Mildred posted a scary article on Facebook saying it causes, you know, cancer and fertility. A good question is, well, the scientists all say the vaccine is not perfect, none of them are, because I mean, there are people who can die from eating peanut butter. So, for real, I mean, peanut butter is dangerous, it can kill people. You know, there are people who can die from,
Anaphylaxis,
can die from peanut butter. But we allow peanut butter because it's, generally safe.
Do we protect ourselves from this by using disclaimers? So for example, like what her comment made me think of, as it took me back to the company with the cars and the keychain, if you have too much weight on it, it's gonna cause the accident, it's gonna cause that addition to shut off. By them putting a disclaimer, it kind of protects them ethically by saying, well, we know this problem exists. So if you minimize the amount of weight that you put on your keychain, it's less likely that the initial will cut off. They protect themselves by saying what the problem is and how to prevent it.
Yeah. Yeah, because you can, that's why you often see on things like, well, if you ever use a ladder, it always has a warning like, do not go above the step. And in those cases, you could say, there's some cases where it's perfectly legitimate, because there are things like peanut butter that are safe for almost everybody, but they have a warning, an allergy warning. Because some people, it's actually not, it's dangerous to. And similarly, like if they have a disclaimer, then the moral question kind of is the disclaimer, put out there soon enough, and is it a legitimate thing to have to do? So, like, should a car's ignition be strong enough to deal with what everyone does? Namely, should it be able to hold like this much keys? And a fair point would be, yeah, you should expect that your ignition can hold a standard amount of keys. Now, if someone's like hanging a brick off it or something, then you'd say, yeah, that was, like, I like to keep my 20-pound weight on my keychain, to get extra swole during when I'm driving. Yeah, that would be, unreasonable. But, normal amount of keys, you'd say, well, even if they put on a disclaimer, that's not reasonable. It's kind of like when we were talking about the problem with the ozone layer. Some people said, wear a hat and put on sunscreen. It's like, that would address it, but that's not a reasonable solution. Yeah, there is that moral question of, what kind of disclaimers can you put on there? And there's a question of like how dangerous it should. If you do look at a vaccine, for example, and they list the harms, and they're honest about it, then that can be a rational choice. Because if you see that, think of like some of the medicines they have, and their effects are like death.
Mm-hmm.
And they
like kidney failure and like liver failure. Like if you take too much Advil, you're gonna like hurt your liver and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, so like it may be treating, if it's treating a condition that's not as bad as the side effects, true, the side effects are not guaranteed, but then you can make a rational choice. Like, okay, it has all these dangers, so I'm making a rational choice. But if people are making their choice based on rumors, things they heard, basically it's a matter of critical thinking. What obligation do you have to verify claims about the dangers of, say, vaccines, climate change, Russian interference, or can you just believe whatever you want to? And what people often say is, I have a right to, the anti-vax people, I have a right to believe what I believe, or my religion says, or even if they're not religious, I just have my right to my belief, so I shouldn't get the vaccination. Or I have a right to believe the Russians weren't in politics. I have a right to believe that climate change is not real. Now, one hand you could say, yeah, we don't have morally compelling people to believe stuff would probably be, holding a gun to that and saying, must believe in vaccines. Would be wrong. But if someone says, essentially what people are saying is, I have a right to believe something untrue that can hurt not just me, which may be okay, it just hurts themselves, but can hurt other people, even kill them. And phrased that way, if you ask someone, do you have a right to believe something that could cause you to directly or indirectly result in the death of other people?
Is that what Clifford says? Is that just like his question?
In a way, yeah, because he's essentially saying, suppose you're going to the ship owner case, suppose you sincerely, some of these like, convince himself, I sincerely believe the ship's going to be fine.
So
but
you have the right to believe that this thing, okay, I understand.
Yeah, or like in the case of the vaccine, if someone says, you've probably seen people on talk shows or on YouTube saying, I have a right to believe, I have my science, I have my doctors, I have a right to believe that vaccines are dangerous, so I'm not going to get, my shoulder, I'm not going to get vaccinated. Now, what the person is saying is essentially they're not saying they're right, weirdly, because they're not coming out and saying I'm incorrect. In some cases, what the weirdest case is that I've seen is they're not saying they're right. they're saying they believe this, which is, I guess, sophisticated in a way, but kind of weird. Because what they're saying is, I have a right to believe something in which, if I'm wrong, I could cause death, harms to my children and others. And so the moral question there is, do people have a right to believe things that could actively harm, even kill other people? Now, we can kind of do this like a silly case. Suppose someone is like a gun denier. They say, guns don't really kill people, so I can shoot people, as much as I want, and it just looks like they're dead. So I should be allowed to just go around, shooting people, because it doesn't really hurt them. They're just active. They're just acting really well. Now, if there was like a gun denier, would we say that's okay? Would we have them on, like YouTube, like noted gun denier, Francisco Six Gun, he's like shooting up everybody. Look, they're all faking. Yeah, but that would be clearly because we all know that guns are killing. And so we wouldn't say that someone has a right to believe that guns, I'm not saying not about the Second Amendment rights, but if someone just says guns don't actually hurt people because everyone's faking it when you're shot. Well, we'd say, no, you can't. That's wrong. You have no right to believe that because that's totally not true. It can hurt people. So we wouldn't say they have a right to believe that shooting someone with a gun doesn't hurt people.
Is that usually, in this situation, is that rhetoric versus logic? Because logic would, or reason would tell you, like, you gotta do further investigation, but rhetoric is enough to oppose action.
Yeah, because a lot of what gets people, doubting climate change, doubting, vaccines, doubting politics, as I said, is rhetoric and fallacies, because they'll, for example, they'll go with scare tactics, or straw man positions, etc., to get people to accept this, and we're just straight up rhetoric. So, if you look at the climate change deniers, what they often do is they'll say, well, climate change isn't real because the scientists they're basically doing an ad hominem attack. One of the standard arguments is all the scientists they benefit somehow. I've asked you, like, well, how do they benefit? And the usual answer is they get research money by claiming climate change is real. And so they're lying because they have a financial incentive to do so. Now, could that be true? Could all the scientists be like, I know it's all a lie, but I'm getting that big, sweet science money? And could the oil companies be totally right? And they're spending, millions of dollars trying to fight the lies of the scientists. And they're completely benign, even though they make tons of money off oil. They're the good guys, and those fat cat scientists rolling in that research money, driving those, sweet Priuses. They're the liars. Yeah, that could be true. Maybe they'll turn out they'll be exposed. They'll be like caught by Scooby-Doo. Like, I would have gotten away from it if it wasn't for Ruby-Doo and those meddling kids. So yeah, possible. But what people do is they rely on that ad hominem fallacy. The scientists, they're getting that sweet research money, so they're lying. Now, yeah, it could be true, but that's a mere ad hominem. Even if they were getting that sweet money, they could still be telling the truth. Also, flipping it over to the oil companies, you could say, well, they profit from, denying climate change. So if the reasoning is, if someone profits, their line is consistent, then we end up with this weird scenario where the scientists are lying, so climate change is not real, but the oil companies are lying, so climate change is real. So can't work. So something's got to be wrong. So that is typically fueled by ad hominem attacks, like they're being corrupted by they have somebody to gain. But the fact that oil companies have somebody to gain doesn't show they're wrong. Even if scientists have somebody to gain doesn't show they're wrong. You have to go with the best evidence. And same with vaccination. What people often argue is a similar ad hominem. The pharmaceutical companies stand to make money, and doctors stand to make money. And some of the vaccines aren't, they're not. Some of them are kind of pricey for what you get, when you think about it. And of course, they keep jacking up the prices. So you could say, well, they stand to get money, so they're lying, vaccines are harmful. Now, this does get some bite, because is it true that pharmaceutical companies jack up prices? Oh yeah, if anybody here has diabetes, it's crazy how much they charge now. And it's also true pharmaceutical companies push stuff, opioid epidemic. So it's not irrational to think that pharmaceutical companies are up to something, because they definitely are. But the mere fact they're up to certain things doesn't mean they're wrong about vaccines. So when people, as you point out, when people think about this stuff, they are kind of using kind of goodish logic, but kind of the wrong way, which is why fallacies are so seductive, because, yeah, I mean, if someone's asked me, do pharmaceutical companies, do they jack up the prices, are they in it for the money? Would they hurt people, actively hurt people to make money?
Yeah.
Yes. Opioid epidemic, thousands of, would they even, cause deaths to make money? Clearly yes. Would they lie? Clearly yes. But are they lying about the measles vaccine? Are they lying about the polio vaccine?
Well, people don't get measles anymore, so.
They do. They do
Well,
now.
not as common. No one's out here just dying of polio, like.
Not polio, not yet.
Huh?
But polio can make,
Wait, what?
if you don't get vaccinated, it can come back. It's not eradicated. We
Oh,
thought-
well, yeah, I'm saying like, yeah, vaccines work because not everyone's
Yeah.
dying of polio anymore.
Exactly.
Like, it's not the sixties.
Yeah.
What's his name, president, we had polio, see, it's not that time.
Yeah, Roosevelt.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Alexander.
Yeah, so we, have good evidence that it does work. And so the question then becomes, how much, effort do you would put in to see if your beliefs are actually grounded? And of course, you can still be wrong. It may turn out that, we may find out, like the big reveal is climate change is a lie. The scientists and the oil companies are right all along. They were the good guys, the scientists and bad guys. Vaccines totally caused autism, and all the, we find like some secret files where they're like, oh, S, these vaccines were F because these vaccines are causing autism, we're gonna get screwed someday. Yeah, it may all turn out, it may turn out that, the Russians never did anything. It wasn't Russian hackers, it was all Americans, or something, or aliens, So, yeah, it may turn out that all this stuff is untrue, but the question is, how much sort of work do you have to put into it? And one argument that people make is, I am entitled to believe whatever I want to. If I don't believe in climate change, that's my right. If I believe vaccination is harmful, that's my right. If I don't believe the Russians interfere in politics, that's my right. And of course, they can say, well, is everything you believe true? Don't you believe some false things? And Kirsten answers, yeah, because we don't all of our beliefs correct. So that is the moral question. How much, in a sense, how much homework do we have to do before we can justly say we believe it? And in some cases, we may not know if it's actually true. They may, as I mentioned, there are people who are climate change deniers who are sincere, sincerely held belief. There are people who are opposed to vaccination they sincerely believe it. They're not, it's not like they secretly know and they're trying to kill their kids and kill other people. It's, they sincerely, otherwise they would not, if they love their kids, which is one assumes they do, they're trying to protect their kids. So they sincerely believe vaccinations are bad. They're wrong, but they're sincere.
I was curious because one thing you did for me is that you really made it clear that rhetoric does win out over logic a lot of times. And then I remember we had a conversation in the critical class where you said a lot of times we hear politicians speak, or when you're just reviewing advertising different things, you can see the fallacy being used at play. Does the American Philosophical Association, are they active in reconciling some of like the blatant fallacies that are stated in everyday, like situations like with the politics thing with the Russians and things, just politics in general? Does the American Philosophical Association get involved with that, or do we have philosophers that get involved in these different situations to say there is the logical viewpoint to look at, and this is how you usually look, just on the side of caution and safety? Or is philosophy at this point in time not seen as
Oh,
the
just,
vanguard of
oh, just like ivory tower, people just, yeah, are our philosophers engaged socially, or do they just kind of hang out in their towers, just doing their own?
Yeah.
Yeah, good, excellent question. Since I've been in the APA, since I've been a professional philosopher, there's been an ongoing debate about that, about how much philosophers should get involved. And one problem is that, as a practical matter, the more you engage sort of in stuff, the more you get kind of labeled as a popular philosopher, and you're often looked down upon by the academic, the elite philosophers. So there is the risk, the more you sort of publicly engage, that you get dismissed more, ironically, more and more by the pros, where that engagement actually sort of like weakens your career. And some years back, I wrote a piece called "Immoral Philosophers Addressing that Problem." And of course, a philosopher, of course, is going to write about that. But there's also a push that the current APA has become much more engaged. Leonard Harris, he wrote a famous piece saying the APA essentially was like the Ku Klux Klan, which it did not make them, but it was true. You know, I mean, they weren't philosophers weren't like, okay, hood up, let's go do some burning and lynching, but it was super racist. Maybe accidentally, so, but definitely. Yeah, so there's been more of a push. Like I'm in the APA, so I get that they have like initiatives on diversity. They do attempt to take political stances, and professionally, there's kind of a couple things. One is, you're right. I mean, if people are good at something, then they should do stuff for society. Because we get, especially public professors, we get public money to do stuff, and so we should also be doing it for the public. In my own case, and I know other people, I try to do that. I write, I write a couple for my blog and other blog, and I try to put stuff out there. I also, all the videos for the classes are free on YouTube, and I've written several books on fallacies that I put out there, for free. People can download, etc. And so I would agree with you. People should engage. Now, the other side, though, is there is the question of, if you're in an academic position in a public university, we're not allowed in our position to do politics because we're like state employees. Now, this doesn't silence us outside of the job. So, for example, like right now, if I were to endorse a candidate, I would be committing an actual crime. I mean, they wouldn't come and taser me too much, but it's illegal. But when I'm when I'm on my own time, I of course can do that. And there is the concern about that kind of engagement in politics. Also, there's the view now, tying to that more practically, there's a worry that professors are all super liberal, and there's the President Trump signed an executive order for freedom of inquiry, and there's a bill in Florida which is going to mandate a survey of all students and faculty to get their political views, because the person backing it, his view is that we're indoctrinating students. So the risk of engaging politically is professors tend to lean left because they're lower middle class and limited support grad students, etc. And so there is the risk that they would be perceived as not educating students but indoctrinating them. So if I were to say climate change is real because of my political beliefs, and talk about politics and stuff from my political ideology, that would be bad. But in the context of critical thinking, if I say climate change is probably real because it meets an objective standard of the majority of qualified experts claiming it's true, in which case that's not. It is a position people can have politically, but it's not political reasoning. It's not, I believe this because I'm like a lefty and get an Al Gore sticker on my Prius. The Prius probably too expensive. It's that as a model of argument from authority, what do the experts say? What is the consensus? And that is probably true. And of course, I always note, as I always say, it could be a global conspiracy by scientists because it's inductive reasoning. They could be lying. And same with the vaccination stuff. It is a political issue. My point is, I'm not saying, ideologically I'm for or against vaccines. It's that all the science shows that they're safe, you have millions, billions of people exposed to it, and if they were dangerous, that would show up.
So your main disclaimer is when you say like, here's the right way to view it, but then you could also view it from an evil
Right.
perspective in an AI.
Yeah, because, it's not just I believe this because of my ideology, it's, well, what is the standard for believing? What are the ethics of belief? And the standard for believing scientific claims is argument from authority. You assess the experts, are they biased? If they are biased, if the climate change scientists are getting sweet research money, that's a minus. But it doesn't show they're wrong, because that would be the fallacy ad hominem. Are they properly educated? Yeah, PhDs. Are they doing proper research? Well, it seems like it. Is there large-scale consensus? Yes. So probably true. Could they be wrong? Yes. And so that would be looking at the standpoint of critical thinking. It just so happens that critical thinking leads you to this position. So I'm not saying believe this because Green New Deal. I'm saying, well, given the best available evidence, that is probably true. If the evidence changes, again, if we have like a climate gate, scientists reveal to accepting sweet research money, admit to faking data, then we just say, well, all companies are the good guys all along. There's bad scientists. Or if it turns out, we get again, we have some whistleblower, says that pharmacies, the pharmaceutical companies knew that they were causing autism, and they were aware of this and they were hiding it. Then we have to say, okay, you guys we were wrong, you're right. And kind of the difference between politics and critical thinking is, in politics, you hold to it because of sincerely held belief, typically. That would be a politically motivated view. I believe it because of my ideology. But a critical thinking, epistemic view would be, I believe it, at least Clifford's argument is, I believe it because of the evidence. And kind of a critical test is to ask somebody, if the evidence changed, would you change your view? And if the answer is yes, an honest yes, then you could at least accept the fact that they are believing it, at least trying to be rational about it. And what I try to do, my view on all these things is contingent on the evidence. Like I said, if there was this revelation that the scientists were all lying, or there was a conspiracy, I would say, yeah, oil companies, they were right. Sorry, guys. Or simply, if it turns out vaccines were truly dangerous and they were just covering it up, then sure. But if someone is just typically people who are climate change deniers or anti-vaxxers, there's nothing you could do to change their mind. Because you can say, look, we have billions of people getting vaccines. They're fine. We have no causal mechanism for how they would cause autism. The one study has been totally discredited and nothing else supports that. And the person just says they still believe, you just say, well, they have no right to believe that. Now, we have no right to force people. We can't drag them and say, we're gonna put a chip in your head and make you believe. But you could argue, they have a right to believe whatever they want, because we have no moral right to, brain control them. But they have no moral right to believe that because it's not rationally based. Especially when it's a danger to others, if it's harmless. For example, suppose somebody wants to believe in fairies, little, like an Arthur Conan Doyle belief, like little pixies and stuff. And they think they're pixies. And if someone insists on that, okay. No evidence for it, but it's not hurting anybody. So you might say, yeah, they shouldn't believe it, it's probably kind of wrong, but, oh well. But if they believe that, pixies must be appeased by murdering their neighbors, then it becomes a problem. So yeah, there is that moral aspect. When it involves things that can hurt other people, how much do we obligate them? And Clifford's view is, yeah, you have to go, you'd say practically, we go by the standards of critical thinking. Do you have adequate evidence for that belief, or do you just want to believe it? And essentially what would be advocated is, it's a view I share, is that people only the right to believe things, then they earn the right to believe. You gotta pay the, you gotta pay the critical thinking cash to get that belief. Otherwise, no. And I'm not advocating, it doesn't be moral to brain chip people and make everybody believe stuff, but people have to earn their beliefs. They have to have that belief, they've got to pay that cash for. And I say this knowing full well that I believe a lot of stupid stuff that I have not paid the cash for, because and then I realize that they're stupid beliefs, but yet I cannot.
Is that how philosophy kind of verifies itself? Is it argues from authority from the earliest person who proposed the idea, then it brings in your understanding of the idea, and then further justifies itself, and then if that's valid, someone else argues from the furthest authority, then your authority, and then puts that.
Yeah, ideally, everything is up for question. Because I always say, one thing I always put out there kind of jokingly is our good dead friend, but just because he's, super famous and super dead doesn't mean they're right. So ideally in philosophy, everything is up for question, even the methodology. So sort of ironically, someone could say, I doubt your critical thinking methodology. But of course they have to give some, in a way we do always have to use reason because you have to give some reason why we should reject reason. So I guess reason is kind of not on the table. Different types of reason, like whether it's good logic or not. Yeah, so a pretty good case can be made that, yeah, we have no right to believe things just because we sincerely do. We have to pay our dues. So again, this had a very, very real consequences. So people who believe sincerely in climate change, people who believe sincerely anti-vax, people who believe stuff in politics. I mean, most of politics is just ideological lie, things that are just objectively untrue. And people believe it and believe it sincerely, and they're totally wrong, and they need to do whenever I think of this, I'm like, they could just do their damn homework. And some people have suggested that people shouldn't be able to vote unless they can do stuff, but then that would be, then people point out the obvious thing, the racists would get a hold of that and they're disenfranchised, it'd be a nightmare. So yeah, we have no qualifications for voting, which is the price of democracy. Because it's better that everybody can vote than we start carving people out. But people should do their darn homework in terms of making decisions. Because if they're just going from what they sincerely believe and believe obviously false things, that's just going to be, I mean, going back to thinking about someone thinks guns can't kill people, they're all just acting, that would be super dangerous. So what about an opposing viewpoint? Well, for Clifford, again, as we've laid out, he thinks, again, you have this obligation. You basically got to do your homework. And he's super hardcore about this. He can, if he was on the talk show, they'd be like, everything, Clifford, everything? He'd say, yes, everything. It's always wrong for anyone to believe anything on insufficient evidence. Now, we may kind of agree that with the big stuff, you gotta check on that. Where people could be hurt or killed. But you may think that he went too far. I mean, just because, and you could, I mean, one thing that's also a fallacy is kind of thinking in extremes, is unless you accept everything, you've got to just reject everything. You can't have some of it. So it would be a false dilemma to say, well, you either believe that every belief must always be perfectly checked and supported, or none of it. Now, you can, of course, have degrees, namely that, the more important a belief is, then we're obligated to, kind of homework it. But other stuff, well, it's kind of like cleaning your house. When you first get a house, one thing that'll probably happen is you'll be, super stoked about the house. So you have, all these projects you're going to do and all these improvements, and you're going to keep it super clean. And then eventually you realize, oh, God, there's just so much to do. And eventually reach a point where, okay, the cooking and cleaning services in the bathroom stay clean. The outside of the house, I'm not going to pressure wash that every day. That's going to just be a little dirty. We're going to do that every few years. And so eventually you kind of reach a point where just realistically you just can't clean everything perfectly. You probably already encountered that already, even like with apartments or dorms, just like, oh, I just can't do this every day. And so maybe with our beliefs that there are some beliefs we can just kind of accept without insufficient evidence and not be like, not be wrong. Again, things that have no consequence for other people that, in a sense, don't really matter. Again, suppose someone believes that there are, they believe in ghosts, but it has no real effect on anything they do. They don't, it doesn't harm people. Well, then you'd say, well, yeah, they believe that. That's okay. So maybe we can do a thing where it's not always wrong. It's just when it becomes kind of dangerous. Just like with cleaning, not having a perfectly spotless house isn't wrong, but if you have like salmonella all over your kitchen, then that's a problem.
Well, what about this opposition when it comes to like religion, right? Because like religion's like a really big thing, and a lot of people are religious, and then policymakers and different people who like do things have religious views, and that's like a big thing.
Yeah.
Because it's like biased religious like thought processes in like legislative process. So what about that there?
Yeah, religion raises an
Always wrong
excellent.
to believe anything with insufficient evidence. No one can really prove the existence of these things that they believe in. So now what? What are we doing now?
Yeah, religion does create a huge problem because for exactly that reason. Namely, if we're being philosophically honest, we do not have conclusive proof, because if we did, we would be like, here's the one true faith, it's the right one, and this is it. We have the proof. So yeah, from the standpoint of epistemology, that's why philosophers are often accused of being atheists, because they often are, because again, if you go by the high standards of evidence, if you suppose you just neutrally, you took the scientific requirements for proving something exists, be it genes or electrons, and you applied it to a religion, then it would, what you get, at least according, you would get, as Hume argued, maybe there is something that created the world. Maybe there is something that ordered things. Is there an entity that actively intervenes in our life on a regular basis? Well, do we ever see, think of like in fantasy movies, where like angels and demons come down and do stuff. Do we ever see that? No. Are there things that happen that defy all physics? That just like, for example, there is an earthquake, but a building in the center full of children does not shake or fall at all, even though like the earthquake splits right through the middle of it. Or a plane loses all power, but then it just gently drifts to the ground. Well, that never happens. So we would say, well, if we apply the scientific method, we don't get that. Now, what you could do, you could say, okay, suppose someone says, God doesn't want people using birth control. Well, how do we test that? Well, God is all powerful, so whatever he doesn't want doesn't happen. What God, as the song says, what God wants, God gets. So anything he really didn't want, he just wouldn't allow to happen. So he's clearly cool with that because he doesn't stop it. Yes, you end up with, if you do apply the method to it, which is why, again, many scientists are atheists, because if you apply it, you don't get like those particular policies. But then from a practical standpoint, political standpoint, here's where it comes in, the problem. People are super into their religions, and so since most people are religious, if you applied this, it would probably show scientifically that pretty much all their beliefs have no foundation. They could be true, but again, claims like God does not want birth control, God doesn't like homosexuals. How do you prove that? So if you had a standard of proof, just even like the most basic level, they couldn't do it. They could refer to the text, but the people disagree about the text. So yeah, there's that problem. So then why does religion have such an influence? Well, one thing is you could also go to our next dead guy, the pragmatic.
I know why.
Yeah.
We
Yeah, so
radical ideas in class today.
yeah, so if we put that standard in place, suppose every time someone came in and said, this is against my religion, and you said, well, suppose I come in and I say, I believe, it's a non-religious belief. I just say I believe this, and I want this law to I believe homosexuals are enemies. going to kill us all. And the obvious thing would be, well, you gotta prove that. You can't just like put bans on people because you say they're aliens, some proof. And if someone comes and says, oh, it's my sincerely held religious belief, then people can then all proof goes out the window. Now, one reason for this is practical. Namely, most people have religions, and they get that if they put the standard, if you had to apply that standard to every religion, theirs would not pass the test, so they'd be out too. So in a way, we all kind of agree we don't require proof because we wouldn't be able to pass muster ourselves. Also, of course, there are political reasons, because people really believe this. So one way to get elected and hold power is appease them. So you play into their views, their ideologies. So even non-religious beliefs, for example, climate change. There are people who believe in climate change.
There's religious people that reject the idea of climate change because of religious reasons, and I'm more.
And there are people who believe in climate change because of ideology. They don't need this. They just believe it. They believe all this stuff because of their ideology. So they don't. There is evidence, but they don't use that evidence. And so a lot of politics is just belief without support. And so we don't use a standard of proof because again, none of them would pass muster, and we don't make it a general policy because we don't want to apply it to ourselves. And also, it's very politically powerful. And from a practical standpoint, the founders looked at the religious wars in Europe, where all the sects were just tearing each other up. And so it was kind of a moral judgment. Do we get really strict about religion, or do we just kind of say people believe whatever they want, and the state's not going to mess with people unless they're hurting or killing other people? And if we just let people kind of do their thing, then they can believe whatever they want, and they're less likely to cause, to go murdering each other. Because you look at the religious wars of Europe, they're fighting over all these doctrines. And if we just say, hey, the state's not going to get involved, believe whatever you want, we're not going to get involved. Which is probably a smart move, because if all these people believe in this stuff, and you don't get into it, and you don't back any of it, and you don't oppose any of them, then you kind of end up with people who can kind of get along. Because no one, everyone's just kind of hopefully not fighting. But then when it becomes a problem, tying it into the point I think you're getting to, what if people start pointing to their religious beliefs and they want to start doing things that hurt other people? So, suppose I was a devotee of Kali, the goddess of destruction.
Okay.
And I feel like Kali really wants me to kill some fools. And that's what she's all about, killing people. And I say, hey, my sincerely held belief is there are people that have got to be killed. The goddess demands blood. Or if I was, an Aztec, they believe that the universe is built on blood. And as you know, just like you have to maintain your house, you got to maintain the universe, and the universe demands blood. So you got to kill people.
The Aztecs, all right.
Yeah, it's a religious, it's a legitimate, it's as legitimate as any religion. So if I say I've got to kill people, and I'm keeping the universe going, if I don't do this, the universe fails and we all die.
I didn't know that about the Aztecs.
That's
That's different. You're learning something new.
Super cool.
So I may have misunderstood Descartes. It seemed to me that in the beginning, before I gave his purpose of the message, he was saying look, I am a man of faith. However, I understand that the people necessarily aren't going to believe these notions unless there's examples outside of religion to prove it. But then it seemed as though he kind of begged the question at the end where it's well, God's all powerful, all knowing, and all this, and I didn't feel like he finished it to fully prove this is why God is good. And do you think because he didn't fully prove how there is a God, it created a problem where some people were saying, well, you look at Descartes, he shouldn't exist because of these different reasons. But then other people would say, well, because he didn't finish that, he can't exist.
Yeah, but in Descartes' case, the problem Descartes runs into is not unique to him, but kind of a special problem. It's called, that you point out, the Cartesian circle. Because Descartes says he's got these proofs for God. And they are, there's standards, ontological argument, etc. But then the question is, how do we know that our, the foundations, the old skeptical problem. How do you know that the standards you're using to assess your arguments are correct? And the skeptic always does that, like, how do you know your arguments are good? And if you give them a reason, they say, how do you know that reason's good? And what Descartes had to do was, stop that regress and give an answer that, where you say, this is the answer, and it just self-evidences it. Now, so what he ended up doing was getting into the circle. He says, whatever he clearly and distinctly perceives that, not sensory, but mentally is true, is therefore true. So he clearly and distinctly perceives, this principle, therefore his arguments are at that foundation, therefore he can trust him. Essentially it's, whatever I clearly and distinctly perceive the reason is true, I clearly and distinctly perceive, the truth of these claims and the truth in this logic being, good logic, therefore they lead to God, therefore I'm sure God exists. So my arguments are good, I know my arguments are good, and my premises are good because I perceive them clearly and distinctly. Then, of course, someone says, how do you know that what you clearly and distinctly perceive is true? And unfortunately, Descartes, he just kind of puts it right in there. I mean, he's honest about it, in a sense. Maybe he didn't realize it. Well, whatever he clearly and distinctly perceives is true, he knows that because God guarantees that. Because God is not a deceiver. So this is the circle. He knows this is true because God is not a deceiver, and he knows God is not a deceiver because he clearly and distinctly perceives that. And so the problem is that he's going to know God exists to know God exists. And it's going to, it's such a big problem, it gets its own name, the Cartesian circle, and it ends up basically just blowing up the meditations. So,
And so Descartes' justification kind of can lead to what Clifford says, is like, so long as you can clearly distinctly believe it,
yeah.
as long as you have sufficient evidence, you can't fault yourself for making a decision, but you can have faith, like you did what was necessary and proper to make that decision.
Yeah, and because you have Thomas Aquinas, in his writing about ethics, he draws a very important consideration, namely, what about cases where people do what they believe is right, but it turns out to be wrong? It's kind of like in movies and stories where the person realizes they're the bad guy, but they were thinking they were doing the right thing, and they're like, oh my God, they realize like, oh my God, we're the bad guys.
Kind of like a tragic hero.
Yeah, in a way, they realize they were over there trying to do right, and then you have that revelation and oh my God, we are the villains in this story. Aquinas said that if you go through the right process of reasoning and you act upon your informed conscience, in other words, you do your homework morally, even if you turn out to get it wrong, as long as you did your homework properly, so to speak, you acted upon what you believed was right, not just like going by how you feel, but again, informed conscience, you put in the work.
But if you did the homework right, and you still were delivered, then you can do your homework right, because you can see like, oh, well, this might happen, so I don't know.
Right, because you could, you could say, well, if you're getting it wrong, you must have screwed up something.
Somewhere.
But we know that Aquinas points out we're not perfect. And so you could do the best you could have done. You, as a human being, you couldn't have done it a better job because you're a finite, fallible human, and you got it wrong.
So in like debate and stuff like that in like law, it's like the idea of anticipating the opposition. Well, when I was in debate, like it would be anticipation of the opposition, like what are they going to bring? So that's what you have to bring in like rebuttal. So it's like, well, if you didn't account for that possible point that they were going to make, you've done something wrong.
Yes.
So, but to a fault, but still, it's just like there's like that idea, like if you're going to do something, you have to make sure that all of these things are correct in
Yes.
like, all of the spaces.
But as a practical matter, you can't anticipate everything. I mean, you don't have perfect knowledge, so there'll be some things you don't know. I mean, one example would be like a common thing that happens in real life and fiction. You are a good person, loyally serving a cause or leader who you think is good, and you, as far as you know, they're so good at like at hiding what they're really up to. Kind of a common thing and really popular thing is that organizations, let's take from Marvel comic MCU, SHIELD, supposed to be good, you know, they're the heroes. But then, of course, the reveal is they're actually controlled by Hydra, by, you know, Nazis. And so you could be like a devoted agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., following the commands of, you know, doing what you think Nick Fury is telling you to do, and you're taking out who you think are, like, say, dangerous people. You're told there's a metahuman here, they are a criminal, they killed lots of people. You go and, you know, you take them out. You feel good about it, you've taken out this killer. Then you do all these other tasks, like these other people are harboring, you know, these murders. You go and get them, you know, they're arrested and taken off. And then you have the revelation where you find out they were the good guys, that you're working for Hydra and you're on the wrong, you know, you're doing bad stuff. Now in that case, yeah, you were doing wrong, and maybe you should have been able to figure it out. But if all the available evidence too, you know, if you were careful, you checked, you know, made sure, you know, you did your research, but the conspiracy was just really good at being, you know, secretive about it and deceiving you, Thomas Aquinas' view, you would not be at fault because you did as much as could reasonably be expected of you, and you acted based on your conscience. You believed you were taking care of, you know, dealing with people who were murderers and killers and harboring murderers, and as far as you knew, everything was legit. So the blame lies not on you, but on, you know, the deceivers. Yeah, so Clifford would agree that you could get it wrong, but as long as you fulfilled your obligations. Now, the practical debate there is, you know, as you pointed out with the example of the debate, how much homework do you have to do to be, you know, exonerated? You know, if someone just says, yeah, whatever, you know, whatever, if I get a text and it says from Nick Fury, it says kill somebody, I just go and kill them, and no questions. Well, we'd say, yeah, that's bad. But if someone is, you know, really careful what they do, and they check it, you know, do research, then we might say, well, even if they get it wrong, they're still morally okay. In the sense that if they had known differently, they would have done something else, and they did all that could be reasonably expected of them. And that is kind of the practical challenge. How much do we have to do? You know, going back to the example of climate change. I believe climate change is real because all the published science, all the experts, you know, 99% of them say this is real. And also, it's supported by empirical evidence, you know, changes in, you can look at the weather data yourself, you know, more extreme storms, changes in average temperatures, but there is a possibility that they are lying. And of course, as people point out, the Earth's climate has changed without us over the, you know, billions of years. And so that could all be a lie. But would I be morally wrong for not having gone in and broken into every scientist's house to search their entire house for like secret basement, you know, hiding places for their secret data? Well, no. It's not on me to go and do a Batman and go and, you know, or maybe you could say, well, if you haven't done that, you have no right to believe. You have to go in and, you know, get every scientist, capture them, interrogate them over the course of months, every single one of them, and check their houses, check their labs, find that secret conspiracy. Well, in that case, you'd probably say that's expecting too much. You don't have, you know, well, I could be wrong. Maybe there is this conspiracy, but I don't have a moral obligation to go and Batman it because, well, I could do it once and then I would be rightfully in jail. Or like, although maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I'd be a climate denier hero, you know, for capturing that scientist.
But could Congress do that? The same way they do in the Mueller report thing?
They could. They could subpoena all the scientific data, and of course they don't have to because it's right. I mean, the data is right there because literally it happens all around us. You know, it's literally there. Yeah, I mean, if they suspected something, they could subpoena scientists and go and seize all their stuff. But no one really has any. For real, the people in the Congress, they don't really think there's a conspiracy because if they really did, they would. If they really believed the scientists were conspiring, back when the Republicans controlled the House and Senate, it's like, well, you believe there's a conspiracy, like you said, you have subpoena power, go and subpoena the scientists, show us the fake data. But you could say the fact they don't do that would indicate they don't really believe what they're saying. Because if they really believe there was a, like you said with the Mueller report, if they really believe there's a global conspiracy by scientists who are plotting to destroy our economy, that would be something they would definitely have to do. Because they would be saying literally, these people, these citizens are conspiring to destroy America. And that would be grounds for a subpoena. That would be, also academic misconduct. I mean, universities would be after them too, because they would be engaged in academic misconduct, scientific misconduct. Yeah, so if they really were up to something, either everybody's in on the conspiracy, or there's not a conspiracy. But there could be. Someday we may find out. 100 years from now, somebody teaching this class, back in the day, the great climate conspiracy of 2020, we found out that alien scroll scientists were killing America. That's how it plays out. So have a good rest of the day. We'll meet again on Thursday for the last